Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and councillors. Some of you on council do know me and know that I also that I made a submission to council 3 years ago. That presentation may be found in your printed agenda and also on the city's website. For those who do not know me, I'll provide a little bit of background. I hold a Bachelor of Civil Engineering and a Master of Urban and Regional Planning, both with an emphasis on transportation planning. I was Acting Commissioner of Engineering and then Senior Director of Roads with the former region of Hamilton-Wentworth for 11 years. I was subsequently a transportation planning and engineering consultant until my retirement in 2016. I worked on many Hamilton projects, including the Transportation Master Plan and many of the rapid transit feasibility studies. I was a founding member of the Sustainable Transportation Standing Committee of the Transportation Association of Canada, and I was a member of the Owner's Engineer Consulting Team for York Region Rapid Transit Corporation. 3 years ago, I recommended that Council direct staff to reevaluate bus rapid transit as an interim or permanent technology while still pursuing LRT. I have become increasingly concerned that with the course that the project is taking because, in my view, the main issues are the governance procurement model and the choice of vehicle for the RT system, and these factors are very much intertwined. I believe that city officials should meet immediately with senior officials of the province and Metrolinx to discuss the potential for a reset of the terms between the city and province Metrolinx without prejudice to the ongoing LRT project. However, in the absence of any successful renegotiation between the city and province Metrolinx, it is absolutely imperative that the city proceed with the implementation of LRT, including a station at Bay Street. Any of the discussions, negotiations should be held immediately and absolutely without prejudice to the ongoing implementation of LRT. The EA update should be submitted as proposed by staff. The reasons for recommending a reset are threefold. The benefits of LRT have been overstated in comparison to BRT. The choice of LRT as a rapid transit technology has unwelcome consequences with respect to Hamilton spending priorities, and BRT has a number of advantages over LRT in the Hamilton context. I won't go into detail because it's in the report, but the Hamilton-King-Main Rapid Transit's business case from February 2010 that was prepared for Metrolinx had a number of methodological shortcomings that gave LRT a huge advantage in comparison to BRT, and the main reason for that was that they looked at the metrics of systems that were being planned or implemented in LRT jurisdictions and in BRT jurisdictions and used those metrics directly in the comparisons in Hamilton. What they did not do was to compare alternative vehicles with the same system in Hamilton, meaning the same rapidways, the same fare systems, the same station locations, and so on. Even with that very favorable LRT assumption in the 2010 benefits case report, BRT provided a benefit cost ratio of 1.4 versus 1.1 at a discount rate of 5%. At lower discount rates, LRT and BRT had the same ranking, but higher benefit cost ratios. And at a 7% discount rate, LRT actually had a negative net benefit. So the issue is, in reality, the only real difference between BRT and LRT systems in Hamilton would be the vehicles and propulsion infrastructure. I believe that the rapid transit case is in reality very different than that set out in that report. Oh my goodness.
You have 1 minute left.
Yes. The choice of LRT as a rapid transit technology has had unwelcome consequences with respect to funding. Hamilton is a sizable, smart, sophisticated, single-tier municipality that should have a much greater ability to direct where that funding goes. I believe that the city is, quite frankly, owed $1 billion for the implementation of rapid transit in Hamilton, subject to meeting provincial/regional transportation criteria and involving Metrolinx in project management. That is the case in York Region. A significant proportion of the funding is going toward replacing infrastructure, because of the requirement to clear 1.5 to 3 meters below grade. This is not sustainable, especially when Hamilton has a huge infrastructure deficit. While it is true that there are some capacity constraints, complete replacement of all the infrastructure is both unnecessary and unsustainable.
I'm afraid your time is up,
Okay,
but we
thank
do
you.
have a few people who would like to ask you some questions, Mr. Gill, beginning with Councillor Whitehead and then Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Ted, and good to see you again. And you did a great job when you were with the city, and it's great to see a very balanced approach in regards to your presentation. I want to dive into the feasibility, BRT, LRT. You indicated in the report the number for BRT actually scores slightly higher than the LRT. Is that correct?
In the benefits case, the BRT had a higher benefit-cost ratio, but the overall amount of the benefit itself was judged to be lower for BRT than LRT.
And what would that element be? Do you know?
I'm sorry, which element?
When you go beyond the overall, what is the overall? So what is the metrics that they use to determine the overall benefit was the differential in that decision?
My understanding is that they used what is called a multiple account evaluation, where they looked at any number of economic, social, environmental factors and ranked those for the systems. But what they did with the LRT versus the BRT was to, for example, give LRT a higher running speed on the rapid ways, give it transit signal they gave BRT signal priority and they gave LRT signal preemption, for example. Those sorts of things actually influenced a lot of the results.
Now, when I looked at it, I was a bit surprised in the report because originally Metrolinx was leaning to and recommending that BRT was the best fit, or at least there was a report that suggests BRT was the best fit for the city of Hamilton. But the numbers were 200, if I remember, 800 to a billion for the LRT, and it was 800, I think, for the BRT A line and B line. So do you see any problem in the fact that when they did that study, all they did is compared one line of BRT, and understanding the amount and cost for LRT, all they did is compare one line along the B line, and they didn't consider the other line as part of that analysis, and that's the A line.
I don't recall the costing details, quite frankly, but I do know that BRT as a technology was a less expensive option than LRT because of the requirements for clearing all the infrastructure under the rails, the electrical supply systems, and so on.
Okay. The taxpayers want to know about value for dollar. So in the report, because I'm glad you identified that it scored higher on the initial report, but what people ask me, and constituents ask me, were they just comparing one line BRT versus one line LRT in one corridor, when the overall plan was LRT and the corridor and BRT and B and A? So did they take, when you look at a feasibility study, was it balanced in regards to those considerations?
My recollection is that it was looking at the B line.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Madam Deputy Mayor. And Ted, good to see you again. Thanks for your years of service through engineering and public works during the regional government days of Hamilton-Wentworth. Over the weekend, Ted, if this somewhat reaffirms what the message was you're conveying today, over the weekend I did some rereading of the original Rapid Ready report that was authored by somebody you'd remember, our former HSR Director, Don Hall. Council of the day unanimously approved RRR as a guiding document for the future of public transportation. It laid out a 25-year strategy of transportation improvement for Hamilton necessary for successful implementation of LRT at some future date beyond the 25-year horizon. On page 25, quickly, Madam Deputy Mayor, quoted, "It would not be productive for Hamilton to build light rail while maintaining 30-minute headways on regular transit routes serving LRT. Perhaps more importantly, early and significant investments in base transit levels were required." Is that kind of reaffirming the messaging that you're expressing and sharing here today? If not, please correct me or add some further comments. Thanks, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Yeah. Councillor, it is reflecting that, and I think the issue is that the spending priorities of Hamilton have been warped a little bit by the announcement of the funding for a portion of the B line. If the City of Hamilton had $1 billion in funding to go towards rapid transit, I suspect that if they had if they were in the driver's seat, as it were, with respect to the entire system, I think that the outcome would be different.
Sorry, Mayor Eisenberger, followed by Councillor Green.
Okay, so given that, Ted, and I appreciate seeing you again, and you've done great things for our city, but given some of the comments we heard just a moment ago about their belief in terms of what the Rapid Ready report was, would you think it reasonable that Council continue to ask the province of Ontario for LRT funding, given that some here are saying that that's not really something that would and you are saying that's something that isn't, quite feasible for the City of Hamilton in terms of what I'm hearing you saying. So do you think it's reasonable for a council unanimously to go to the province of Ontario on a continuous basis and say, give us LRT funding, when we have some that are saying, maybe the Rapid Ready report didn't say that, or it didn't quite focus on LRT, or it didn't quite clarify what BRT is? I mean, do you think that's a reasonable approach to take based on where we are today?
I believe that as the decision was made to go with LRT, that the city has every right and responsibility to continue to push that in the absence of another option. But I also believe that the city should be more forward. The city is a single-tier, sophisticated municipality, and I know from having worked with many of the staff in both the city and at the province before, the city has a great staff, and so do the province. I don't think that, for example, Metrolinx has any superiority with respect to things like project management and so on. I mean, your city manager was the chief planner on the Red Hill Valley Parkway, for example, and that project went extremely well.
Yeah. So given that, given that our city staff are suggesting that LRT is the best option moving forward, certainly being led by Paul Johnson, is there a reason why we should now pull away from LRT, given all the good work that's been done at this point?
My own belief is that if the rapid transit vehicle was BRT and all the other elements of the system were the same, that BRT would be a better option in the Hamilton context. And those reasons are set out in my brief that is
I
the
don't have your brief in front of me, Ted,
okay.
But I know you've held that view for quite some time, but certainly that's not the approach that this council has taken for the better part of 6 or 7 years. I think the focus has been on all the study and the review and analysis has been on LRT at the end of the day. The benefits case analysis that was done by Metrolinx was all focused on, doing the evaluation in terms of what the overall benefits were, not only from a transportation perspective, but also from an uplift perspective. Also came out to the conclusion that the B-line LRT was the best bet for the City of Hamilton in terms of the overall benefits package that came with it, including employment. So, do you argue with that?
I made a presentation to Council 3 years ago. You were, at that time, not on Council.
Correct.
And I made very similar points and suggested that the city should pursue BRT in parallel with the work that they were doing on LRT. That was not done, and I have, as I said in my presentation, become increasingly concerned with the role of Metrolinx, because it's going to become a procurement model that, for all intents and purposes, is going to require an outside operator, not the HSR or a rapid transit corporation owned by the City of Hamilton. So that's one of the reasons that I felt compelled to come forward.
Okay, thank you, Ted. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Green.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Mayor. And Ted, I certainly share your concerns as it relates to procurement, particularly with ATU and the workers that have done a fantastic job given some of the constraints that they've had with HSR. So in your opinion, and in your very educated opinion, have we as a municipality done everything we can as it relates to investing in transit to put our best foot forward to be in the stage that we're at right now?
I would say a qualified yes, and I'll qualify that by saying the city should really be putting the province's feet to the fire with respect to the funding. For example, in York Region, they are funding 100% of their BRT project to the tune of $1.8 billion. But that is being transferred to Viva Next, which is the rapid transit operator in York Region, to operate, and it's a wholly owned corporation of the region of York. So the bottom line would be, I think it's nonsense to say that the province is only going to give you this money for LRT if there are better options out there, and that the city of Hamilton is owed that money for rapid transit in any case.
I appreciate where you're going with owed. I don't necessarily agree, just having understood politics as they were. But in particular to our investments in transit, while you've been here, while you were employed here, you know that we had a 10-year transit strategy that we just kicked down the line. Do you believe that this municipality has been proactive in investing in HSR, our local public transit, over the last 10 years or during your time as a transit engineer here?
Within the budgetary constraints of the city of Hamilton, I would say so.
So vis-a-vis roads and everything else, you think that we have put our best foot forward?
Again, given the budgetary constraints, I mean, everybody knows that we have an infrastructure deficit, and that's not just in roads and sewers and water mains and so on. It's also in transit, frankly.
So
it's across the board.
What plays a heavier impact on roads, buses or LRT?
A heavier impact on the structure of the road, you mean?
Correct.
Well, LRT would be built with rails on a concrete base. BRT would be running in a rapid way by itself. And the structure of what's underneath those vehicles would have to be constructed, tailored for those vehicles. In regular traffic, buses' axle loads, frankly, are even greater than semi-trailers in terms of the individual axle loads. So there is wear and tear from buses on our arterial roads today.
And do you believe, as a traffic engineer or transit engineer, that the way out of an infrastructure deficit is to build more roads, or is it to invest in public transit?
It is not to build more roads, no. I believe that transit should be the priority at this point.
I fully agree and concur. Would you agree with the opportunity that integrating the A-line concurrent with this, we've heard about an announcement about BRT along the A-line. Would you agree that given the next best case scenario, so you've given your best case, 3 years ago when you came, you said parallel. We're now 3 years forward, and Del Duca comes and provides full A-line evaluation and assessment for that next step. In your opinion, next best case scenario, would you agree that that's a smart thing to do right now and look at integrating the airport into the LRT B-line?
If I were a benevolent dictator in charge of the city of Hamilton, I would go with BRT and I would push for the A-line and B-line at the same time.
I fully appreciate that response, and fortunately we don't have benevolent dictatorships, but we do have this committee, and I certainly appreciate you being here before us today. Thanks, Deb.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Marula.
Just quickly, and many thanks for the presentation through you, Madam Chair. With respect to Ottawa, my understanding is they had put in a BRT in one phase and eliminated it and then went with an LRT system. Can you, do you have any familiarity with that particular issue? And if so, what contributed to that?
Well, I do know that, firstly, Ottawa is a larger community than Hamilton. Secondly, I do know that the BRT in some portions of the city ran in separate rapidways and so on, and that separate rapidway could be relatively easily used for morphing into an LRT system. I would note also that York Region, with their BRT system, has built it so that it can be modified in future to be changed to an LRT system as well. but I would point out that in my conversations with the president of the York Region Rapid Transit Corporation last week, that their BRT conversion to LRT has been pushed out past the year 2041 in their 2016 master plan, because they foresee that BRT will continue to serve its purpose until after that date.
So through you, Madam Chair, on that point, then they do see the LRT as more of a better system, per se, one that deals with larger ridership and other aspects. So wouldn't it be advantageous to perhaps expedite that directly to the LRT rather than taking it in a phased approach?
It obviously has made sense in the Ottawa context, but I would argue that we should be going with the BRT phase in Hamilton first.
And on that point, through you, Madam Chair, wouldn't that then increase or escalate the potential costs down the road, making it probably improbable or unaffordable down the road if we don't act now?
Not necessarily, because if you were to implement BRT with a greater system today, the chances of more economic uplift would probably be greater with the system being in place sooner.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that we're on the same page with respect to the importance of rapid transit, and the only distinction is between bus rapid transit rather than light rapid transit. So for that, I commend your efforts, and I thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. Before we go to the second-time speakers, Councillor Pearson, can you take the chair? I'd like to ask you a question on the Viva system. I had an opportunity to tour their system last year, and the garage, the bus barn, and the staff were certainly very excited about the buses themselves. The buses were customized, I believe. They were able to order them according to their specific needs, and I'd like you to comment on the bus system itself. Has it been a success, in your opinion? Has it been able to, A, move the bodies, the number of people that they want? And there seems to be a perception about LRT versus BRT. One is sexier than the other. Have they been able to address that particular point?
York Region made the decision to go with BRT initially quite some years ago. And the vehicles, the predominant vehicle in their fleet is a Van Hool, which is a Belgian bus, which is totally wheelchair accessible and is a higher order bus than their typical local transit bus. It uses the rapid ways, of course, and it has dedicated stations that are quite nicely architecturally designed. And it also, in discussions with Mary Frances Turner, who I mentioned earlier, she's the president of YRRTC, she said that their next priority is looking at electrifying their system, or going with electric buses over time. I did ask about whether or not they were considering autonomous buses, and they said they had looked at elements of that in the past, and it may well follow after electrification.
Thank you for that. And through the chair, autonomous buses, we've raised this issue prior to today's meeting, and it's something I believe strongly in. Do you think that we will get to that stage eventually where autonomous buses will be part of a regular transit network?
I do believe so. I think, for example, it's not out of the question to consider in the relatively near future in effect, a train of buses with the front one being driven by an operator and the others being autonomous buses following that, to have essentially the same capacity as one or two LRT vehicles as necessary.
Through the chair, has the Viva network, the York Region's BRT system, do they deem it a success?
Well, all indications are so. Mary Frances Turner was certainly, when I asked her the question, would you consider, do you regret the decision to go to BRT? She said, absolutely not. And there is a report out that I quote in my piece that says that York Region in 2016 over 2015 has had a much greater employment growth than Canada and the GTA and Ontario by some factor.
Through the chair, economic uplift is another argument that we're hearing to move the LRT project forward. Is there any evidence of economic uplift associated to BRT?
In Hamilton or in York Region?
In York Region, or any other city that you know that
Yeah.
uses BRT?
I've certainly seen that in York Region, because I was working on the owner's engineer team for a number of years there on implementation. And I have seen the development that's been occurring in York Region adjacent to the rapidways.
So through your experience and through the information that you've gathered in your presentation through the chair, is there an advantage then in terms of economic uplift, LRT over BRT, or is it quite similar? It's moving bodies in a higher order transit.
In the Hamilton context, I don't believe that the vehicle choice will make a big difference in the economic uplift if the other things are implemented, including dedicated rapidways, proof of fare system, dedicated stations, and the like. I think that the differences are going to be minimal.
Thank you, through the chair. One of my concerns with the EA is the inflexibility of lack of flexibility of LRT versus, for example, BRT. One of the glaring errors I see in the EA is the omission of a stop at McNabb. We don't have an actual LRT stop that would meet the needs of passengers needing to transfer onto our bus system. It's at our hub. Is that, in your opinion, a glaring error, a big mistake with the current system that's before us?
In my presentation, I did note that I do believe that a stop at Bay Street is necessary. The other elements of the system, whether it's LRT or BRT, would essentially be the same, and I concur with the station locations other than that.
Through the chair, you mentioned the timing. I believe now the LRT is no faster than the current buses system that we have on our line today. Can you manipulate BRT to truly make it a rapid system through changing lights, being able to control the signals and control the traffic in the lane? In other words, can it be as quick in moving bodies as an LRT?
BRT and LRT would essentially be equal, in my view, in terms of performance if all the other elements of the system are the same.
So the chair, is it necessary to have a designated lane with a physical border on a BRT system, or can it simply be something that's a little, again, more flexible, that a bus could move back and forth and traffic could share the lane in off hours?
It would be preferable to have a separated rapidway, but one of the benefits, and it could be built into LRT, but it would be harder to change. Sorry, LRT, but it would be harder to change, would be doing, I hate to use the word experiments, but it would almost be an experiment if you had a good indication that a certain solution would work, that you could proceed with that, and if it didn't work, you could go on to the next step. One example of that might be King Street between Wellington and Mary, where the right-of-way is actually narrower than your normal 66-foot road allowance. It's only 58 or 59 feet. But if you can picture a uniform surface from building face to building face with half of the space being allocated to pedestrian and cyclist priority and half being dedicated to transit and vehicle priority, and the regulation being no stopping any time, I believe that you would have a situation that would look much more like a modern European city in that kind of context than a very inflexible view which would have dedicated spaces, not just priority, but dedicated spaces for these users through the downtown.
So the chair, have you looked at or seen any examples of electric buses?
I haven't actually ridden one, but I have done some surfing online, as many have, and I know that they are out there. There are also buses that use biodiesel. I think there are any number of technologies that could be considered as an interim or final phase.
Thank you. I know that Edmonton, actually the province of Alberta, and the federal government partnered with the largest electric bus company in the world, and they've actually opened a plant in Alberta, which is creating permanent high-level, high-paying jobs, something I would have loved to have seen us leverage this opportunity into something that is more sustainable in terms of long-term employment opportunities. From what I'm hearing, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you know where I stand on the LRT. I'm not supporting it. Because of what you're saying, to me, we're missing an opportunity to have a much broader. I'm going to be asking a question. Would you agree that the BRT could provide service to a greater number of residents in the city of Hamilton in a more cost-effective way than the LRT system before us?
It could provide it sooner than LRT. I think eventually LRT and potentially BRT on escarpment crossings and so on will end up with essentially the same kind of system, such as the blast network. I think that the BRT system could be more cost-effective in my view.
Why? Through the chair.
The LRT system uses quite a large vehicle. It uses a lot of infrastructure for propulsion, including the electric catenary wires and electrical substations and the like. And it's also requiring that the infrastructure that is 1.5 to 3 meters below and beside the tracks be moved, and there is a cost to that. So BRT can actually take more incremental steps in terms of implementation, and there may be cost savings available as a result of that.
Through the chair, again, another issue is the concern, especially during rush hour, MAX students trying to get to school and people being forced to wait for buses as they go by full. Is it possible to address that type of overflow with BRT? LRT, the argument is you just have a longer train, you have the capacity to move more bodies. Can that be done with BRT, through the chair?
I believe it can, yes.
Okay. Those are my questions for now, and I do believe we have two. I'll take the chair back. Second-time speakers, beginning with Councillor Whitehead, then followed by Councillor Green.
Thank you. My assistant and I interviewed Jenny Schuwitz, who's done a number of studies for the Federal Treasury on higher order transit. And when I talked to her about what's happening in Hamilton, LRT, BRT, she had indicated that BRT is virtually the same uplift, more adaptive, more dynamic. Sounds to me like you're agreeing with her findings.
I have said that in the Hamilton context, I don't believe that the choice of vehicle, whether it's an LRT vehicle or BRT vehicle, will have any material effect on economic uplift.
Appreciate that. And there's a question with respect to Ottawa, and my understanding is on their BRT, they were up to 180 buses at a 2-minute headway. So they clearly had a demonstrated need and a more efficient approach to put LRT in place. Did you understand that same data? Were you aware of that?
I haven't reviewed that data.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Green?
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Mayor. And Ted, I appreciate you could tell you're a municipal veteran when you can stand this long in front of a committee. So I've had the privilege of being in Quito, Ecuador, where they have BRT, as well as in Winnipeg, where they have a newer BRT. And the BRT in Winnipeg, they call nowhere the suburbs, and that's where they built it with very little economic uplift. And they've actually lamented the fact they didn't go LRT urban. But you are familiar, Madam Deputy Mayor, that in Hamilton we had a very short experimental project with lane-separated buses. Are you familiar with that?
I am.
Are you also familiar that this council did not support lane-separated bus rapid transit?
I am aware that they eliminated the demonstration project, yes.
And so in your opinion, do autonomous electric buses in traffic, in gridlock traffic, move faster than the cars that are around them or beside them?
That would apply to any vehicle that's in mixed traffic.
So in your opinion, BRT, LRT must be lane separated, light prioritized in order for it to be considered rapid?
Yes.
And you would also agree perhaps that with the projected populations, we're only going to see increased traffic in the urban settings as we see this shift that has been happening just across North America?
Correct.
So given that, and given the fact that you have already said, I think quite eloquently, that at this stage it'd probably be foolish to give up on a $1 billion investment. Would you be willing to come back here? Because I'm very interested in your comments around our procurement process with Metrolinx. And I think that for Hamiltonians, for a lot of folks, is going to be a really important conversation. Would you be willing to come back here with the same experience and expertise to help us through that system and ask those difficult questions?
Well, that's a big question. Certainly all of my thoughts and my research on that are contained in my brief. If the city in its infinite wisdom wanted to call on me for some volunteer advice, I'd be happy to provide that.
Well, I'm going to say, based on the experience that you've brought forward here today and the way you've been able to so adequately answer these questions, I'm personally inviting you to come back when we get into procurement, because I think you're quite right as it relates to who operates and who maintains and getting into those nuances. Because as I understand, Madam Deputy Mayor, the costs for maintaining buses have been presented as being higher than the operation and maintenance costs of LRT. So I'm very interested in having you return back to really help us flush that out. So I thank you for being here and look forward to seeing you at the procurement stage. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Pearson, can you take the chair? And I'd like to extend the same invitation if we can get you back here if we explore BRT.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take the chair back. Thank you very much for your presentation, and we're going to move on to Megan Platts.